Okay, so we are now being recorded. And thank you all. Let me start off by thanking everyone for taking time to join us today. My name is John Sagoda. I am the Associate Executive Director for Public Policy and Professional Relations here at TESOL International Association. And co-presenting with me today is Ellen Fern with Washington Partners. Ellen, you want to say hi? I think Ellen muted her line at the moment.
Oh, sorry. Hi, everyone.
Ellen, you're there. Good, we didn't lose you.
Yeah, I didn't realize. Yeah, okay.
Great.
I muted too many things.
Great. All right, so we will walk you through this orientation and overview of the summit. We're very excited that you are all coming to Washington, D.C. in about a little less than 2 weeks for the 2014 summit. We have about 60 people registered, which is a new record for us, so we're very excited to have such a large number of ESL educators from across the country coming to D.C. And there's still time to register, so if you have friends and colleagues who are interested in coming, we encourage you to encourage them to come and join you here in D.C. But we will first start off by giving an overview. Let me see, here we go. Just before we get started, some protocol, some housekeeping as I mentioned before. We are recording today's orientation webinar, and we will post that recording, a link to that recording in the online community. So please, if you could help us out by muting your phones or microphones, please, just to cut down on background noise. We will have time for questions during and following the presentation orientation, so certainly at that time we want you to ask any questions you may have. You can certainly also type them into the chat box that's on your screen as well, and we will do our best to answer them. But we should be able to cover any questions you may have in terms of what to expect, how to prepare, and all that good stuff. Just to give a brief overview in terms of what we will cover in the orientation today, we will start with a brief overview of the actual Advocacy and Policy Summit, walking through the agenda a little bit, giving a little bit more details about what will be covered, who will be speaking, just the logistics of the event. We will then move on to talk a little bit about advocacy, the purpose of advocacy, how we describe advocacy, and the purposes of your visits on Capitol Hill, which is one of the main features, of course, of the Advocacy and Policy Summit. And from there, we're going to talk through just logistics and tips and steps in terms of scheduling your meetings with your members of Congress, how to do that, some things you can expect, and then some Hill visit hints. Some of this information you should have already seen in the information documents that have been shared. So we will be covering some of that information again. Of course, those information documents are there to help you and provide a lot more detail. But this is, if you haven't had a chance to read those yet, this will give you a snapshot about some of the logistics to expect and some of the details in preparing for the summit. So just with a brief overview of the agenda for the summit begins on the Sunday, the 22nd of June in the late afternoon. We've found that for those of you who may have attended the TESOL Advocacy and Policy Summit last year, or in the past when it was called simply TESOL Advocacy Day, as interest has grown in this particular event, we have expanded the program over time. It used to be all done in one day, which was very intensive. It's now spread out over a little over 2 days, and may expand further in the future. But what we found by starting a little bit early Sunday evening, it allows people some time to prepare and get a chance to meet their colleagues and begin the networking, which is a key feature of the summit, and prepare for the days ahead, because the intensity level tends to pick up over time. So we will start Sunday evening with simply an overview. We'll give an update on some of the key legislative issues that TESOL International Association is following in the U.S. Congress. Some will probably do an icebreaker or two so you get to know your colleagues and help with networking, and we will have an opening reception. The next day on Monday, throughout the morning, we will have a variety of speakers and breakout sessions, which I'm going to give you more details in a moment, and then we will break for lunch. But in terms, just referencing that morning, I tend to refer to the morning of Monday being the policy section of the Advocacy and Policy Summit. And you'll see by the speakers we have lined up that we're covering many of the major policy issues affecting the TESOL profession. What we tend to do with the summit is focus at a national level here in the United States. So many of the speakers come from federal offices that are covering areas of policy affecting TESOL members and the TESOL profession as it is in the United States. So we will have some speakers from the Office of English Language Acquisition, which of course is working on K-12 ESL issues. The relatively newly named Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, OCTE. Some of you may know them by their former name, the Office of Vocational and Adult Education, or OVE. They recently renamed themselves earlier this year. They will be giving an update from their office as well. In addition, for those who work in a university setting and international students, we'll have some speakers from the Student and Exchange Visitor Program at the Department of Homeland Security, talking about exchange visitors, visas, and the SEVIS system. We also have a speaker from the Department of Justice who will talk about civil rights issues for English learners, as well as a speaker or two talking about, from a national level, the Common Core state standards and impact on a policy level for English learners. We have one confirmed speaker with the American Federation of Teachers who will be addressing that issue and may have another. So it's sort of a broad spectrum of different policy issues packed into that morning. Some of them are presented in sort of a general session format, and new for this year we will have some breakout sessions. So different times in the morning you can have your choice of a different topic to listen to. After lunch on Monday, the focus shifts from policy to advocacy. So that's where will be much more interactive sessions and training activities in terms of how to be a better advocate for your students, some tips and strategies in terms of developing advocacy for yourself and for colleagues. And then we will spend a good part of that afternoon talking about and preparing for your visits to Capitol Hill, which will occur the next day. We will use a variety of activities such as I'm sorry, my mind just went blank. We'll do like role playing, some sharing of information for people who have participated in before, who've gone to the Hill before and met with their members of Congress. We'll allow you an opportunity to meet with people from your same state if you are meeting with people from your same state to help prepare for your visits and plan for your visits and how those are going to be executed. So it'll be very hands-on, very interactive, and it'll give you plenty of time to prepare for your visits that will occur on Tuesday. And then on Tuesday, of course, the bulk of the day will be provided for your Capitol Hill visits, and we'll walk through some of those logistics in a couple moments in the orientation. But your schedule that day will be up to you to determine in terms of the number of visits you're able to schedule. We encourage everyone to have at least 2 visits that day, ideally one with their representative in the House of Representatives and one more with at least one of their senators. Depending upon if you are coming with others from your state or by yourself, you may have 2, you may have more. It just sort of depends upon what you're able to do that day, how many people you're working with, and so forth. And then we will close with a closing dinner and debrief. We encourage everyone to, if they can, stay for that, because not only it'll be a great meal, but it'll be a great opportunity to share what you have learned through your visits on Capitol Hill. And what we have found with the whole Advocacy Summit experience, it's a real nice way to sort of close the loop in terms of what you have done, what you have learned throughout the whole summit, and sort of furthers the opportunity to network with your peers and learn from your peers, and then prepare yourself as you sort of go back home, how to bring the experience home and share with your colleagues and your peers back at home. So that is a snapshot of the agenda and how it will unfold. Let me see, clicking to the next slide. So just some tips, and we're going to walk through some of these in a little bit more detail in just a few moments. But as you prepare for the summit, the first thing we should really do is to make some time, plan to make some time for making your appointments on Capitol Hill. Members of Congress and their staffs are very busy and sometimes are a little bit tricky to get a hold of. So it may take you a couple of phone calls, a couple of email messages to be able to secure your appointments for Tuesday the 24th. If you haven't started that process, I really encourage you to start as soon as possible. Sometimes some meetings don't come through to the last minute. Sometimes meetings need at least a week to 10 days to be able to secure. So if you haven't already started that process, I encourage you to get that started on that, and we're going to cover some of the tips and logistics in a few minutes. We will be sending you some background information by early next week in terms of some of the policy issues TESOL International Association is following. These will be in the shape of some reports that are publicly available, as well as sort of these issue briefs that we're developing that give an overview of, for example, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, what it is, the current status in the U.S. Congress, some of the key issues therein. And these are provided for your information so you can come into the summit with some basic understanding of some of the policy issues, the specific legislation we're following. It's definitely to your advantage to come in with some grounding of that information, because there's a lot of information happens quickly at the summit. So to come in unprepared, you'll find yourself at a disadvantage. So when that information is shared over the next couple of days, please take some time to review it before you get here in Washington. Similarly, to prepare for the summit and your meetings on Capitol Hill, you're encouraged to do some homework, and we're going to talk about what that might look like, different things you can do in advance. But it's about, taking a few moments to look up some information about your members of Congress, who they are, what their background is, where they come from. Perhaps if you can find some information about their staffs, but more importantly, bringing some information about what's happening in your school, in your district, in your program, to be able to convey that information to your members of Congress, because they are probably not likely to know about what's happening in ESL back in their districts. So you're going to be that conduit of information. So to do some homework about knowing what that picture looks like in your school, in your district, is really important. And another key asset to this particular event is the opportunity to network and share information with your peers. There will be at least 60, if hopefully more people from across the country who are coming to this very specialized event to learn more about policy for ESL, to engage in advocacy for ESL, and for the TESOL field. So it's a real focused event, and we have found, and hearing from others who've come, that the networking and the discussions that occur at this event are unlike any other. So we encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity over the next couple of weeks. So from here, I will turn it over to Ellen, who'll talk a little bit more about advocacy.
Thanks, John. First of all, I just want to tell folks my name is Ellen Fern, and I work for a small government relations and public affairs firm called Washington Partners. And we have been working as a government relations specialist consultant to TESOL for the past 7 to 8 years. And Washington Partners does specialize in education policy, and we work on a range of issues that are critical to for K through 12 education, to teachers, to after-school programs, to literacy, to STEM-related topics, etc. So that's a little bit about who I am. And why is TESOL investing in this specialized summit looking at policy and advocacy? And it's really so members of Congress and their staff at the federal level can learn more about what you are doing on a day-to-day basis as you work with your students in a variety of settings. Advocacy, if you look in the dictionary, is defined as organized action in support of an idea or cause. And really, in our democracy, it's left up to us as constituents to educate elected officials on the issues that are important to us and the issues that we are expert in. And at the end of the day, it's all about educating and really establishing an ongoing and trusting relationship with your elected officials and their staff. So ultimately, we'd like to see you become a resource for them as it relates to teaching English to speakers of other languages, whether you're in a higher ed setting, whether you're in an adult education setting, or whether you're in a K through 12 classroom. Policymakers have a lot of information at their fingertips, but they need to hear from constituents and be educated by them about what is really happening, what's working, what's not working, as federal policy, rolls out and gets down to the classroom level. So advocacy is educating and really establishing an ongoing trusting relationship so you can continue to educate and elected officials and their staff on the topics that you are expert in. Next slide. So the purpose of your Hill visits is, as I just said, and will continue to stress throughout the remainder of our time, is to develop a relationship with congressional offices. And really, I want to emphasize how important it is to develop a relationship with staff. Elected officials obviously are very important, but they are not doing the day-to-day work in depth as their staff are. Obviously, they need to, elected officials have to know a lot about many different issues, but it's really left up to their staff, who get to specialize in certain topics, to advise them and follow issues and can get into a deeper level of understanding than an elected official. So staff are really critical to our work. It's also important for our elected officials to understand the impact of what they're doing at the federal level and what then happens in your day-to-day life. Oftentimes, elected officials think they are doing really good policy, but then we get unintended consequences as it rolls out to the local level. And so they need to know and understand about what you're doing, your impact, your successes, and your challenges. It's really important to talk about your challenges. Also, we want to link what you're doing at the local level to the vision of President Obama and Congress's stated goal over the last 6 years of graduating more students to be college and career ready. And because I think in a bipartisan way, all federal elected officials do want this to happen. They know it's important for our competitiveness, both in terms of workforce development and creating students that can participate in our economy and be competitive with other students graduating from around the world. As I said, it also, and it is, you are going to be one of the few voices up there, right, talking about issues facing ESL teachers, facing your students. There are not a lot of people, honestly, coming to talk about education issues facing English language learners, whether they be in the K through 12 classroom or adult education. And we really would like to present TESOL members as experts in this field on a variety of issues and become that go-to resource. Next slide. So now getting back to the logistics of how to schedule a meeting. As John said, our goal is for you to have 2 visits on Capitol Hill, one with your congressional representative and at least with one of your senators. If you haven't done so already, you should email a letter requesting a meeting with your member of Congress to their scheduler. if you have already emailed your request and you still haven't heard anything back by this Monday, this is when you need to start picking up the phone and making follow-up phone calls. It is a very busy time in Congress, and often schedulers make the members' schedule, week by week. They try to sort of schedule ahead, but it's not always impossible. But you are not being a pest if you follow up to your written request to meet with that member of Congress. Also, if you get a response back via email or via the telephone that the member is just not going to be available that day, you want to quickly say, oh, well, that's fine. You'd be happy to meet with the education legislative assistant who advises that member of Congress on education issues, going back to my point about how critical staff are. And also, once you have your meeting nailed down, don't be surprised if you get a call the day before you leave to come to D.C., the day of, asking you to reschedule to a different time. It's because hearings and meetings and votes come up at the last minute that really congressional representatives really don't have control over, so that scheduler will get in touch with you if they have to reschedule to a different time. But it's really, don't take it personally. They're juggling a lot of things, and it's just sort of part of the reality of trying to make scheduling that meeting.
And if I could just jump in here briefly, Ellen, as I mentioned before, we have sent out the directions and information sheets on how to walk through this in a little bit more detail. What I usually recommend, there's a website you can go to that we've linked in those messages, contactingcongress.org, that you can find information about your members of Congress, who they are. But ultimately, a good starting place is once you know who it is you're going to be reaching out to, finding that members of Congress, their website, their webpage, whether in the House or in the Senate, because typically they will provide directions on their webpage about how best to contact their office to schedule a meeting, whether it's filling out a form on their website to send that way, by faxing a letter to their office. That's a good starting point. But also it's a good opportunity there to learn a little bit more about your representatives in Congress, the issues that are important to them, their background. Then also more importantly, and this tends to be more so on the Senate side than on the House side, frequently members of the Senate will have some kind of like weekly social event for constituents from their district who are or from the state that are in D.C., like coffee with the congressman or something. And so they'll be posted on their website. So if you go to their website, you find that information, you might be able to work that into your schedule. It's something just to be aware of. And someone just posted a question to the chat about sending out the information of contacting the congressional representatives. Yes, we will send that out again to everybody. It's also in the library, the group library in the TESOL community. So if you log in through that, you should be able to download that. But we will resend all that information today. Yes.
And some of you might be wondering, wow, I really wish you all, John and Ellen, would make the appointments for us, because that might be a little easier. The thing that's really critical here, though, is you are constituents of the senator and the representative, and you have elected them into their positions, and they do want to meet with you, and you actually have a better chance as a constituent getting a meeting than a hired staff person does. And so that's why, so in addition to trying to educate you about how easy it is to get a meeting with your member of Congress or staff, you are going to be ultimately more effective because you are an actual constituent. And you really do, I'm going to push you a little bit, you really do have plenty of time on Tuesday, June 24th, to have 3 meetings, to have 2 meetings with both your senators' offices and 1 congressional representative. There really is plenty of time to do that, so don't be concerned about that. either. But as we said, we're at least having 2 meetings. We're hoping, we're asking each of you to schedule.
Absolutely. And just to build on that, as I mentioned briefly before, if there are multiple people coming from your state, we will be connecting each of you. In fact, we should have already connected each of you by email to know that, okay, there'll be, say, 2 or 3 others coming from my particular state, and we encourage you to coordinate your planning so that you can actually approach this as a team. Assuming that each of you has a different member of Congress in the House, you'll have 3 different meetings there, but of course you all have the same senators. So if you coordinate your efforts, you can sort of plan your day together. And depending upon the size of your group, you could have many more meetings that day. So that's why it's important to coordinate in terms of your scheduling. And then once we arrive at the summit, we will give you plenty of time as a group to sort of plan how those meetings will unfold. So here's the next slide.
Sure. And so in terms of the resources that we're also putting together for you for your Hill visits and to help prepare you, we're going to put together a list of suggested talking points to give you an idea of what we think you should be talking about, what federal policy issues are on the legislative agenda. And obviously we are not trying to script you at all, but we just want to give you,
sorry about that.
We want to give you we want to give you some suggested talking points so you can start thinking about how you want to infuse them in your conversations. We're going to go through some tips for a successful meeting, but we also have a tip sheet for you to think about as you prepare and get ready to go on your visits, what makes a more effective / successful meeting, and what to expect, meaning like you should expect a lot of people. It's going to be a very busy time of year, and many people like yourselves are going to be wandering around Capitol Hill scheduling visits, so there might be long lines going through security, which is just like airport security, and it's going to be very hot, and you might have to have a meeting inside in the hallway, literally, because congressional offices are very small, and so when there are lots of people in town, there literally is not enough room in congressional offices, so having a meeting in the hallway is actually quite common. We also will be giving you what's called a leave behind folder, because as part of a meeting you should also leave something behind to help staff and the member remember who you are and what issues you talked about. So TESOL will be providing you with a leave behind folder, which will have information about TESOL, about some position statements, but please feel free. You should also bring with you some information about your program, your students, your district, your what's going on in your adult ed program or your intensive English program. There will be plenty of room for you to include your personalized information in your leave behind folder, and so we encourage you to bring that. And so you'll leave one folder for each visit you do. So ideally there'll be, we will arm you with 2 to 3 leave behind folders. Okay, so what to expect on the visit. So who's going to be there? As we said, we hope that you'll get to meet the senator or the Congress person, but you might be having that meeting, the sort of the guts of your meeting with a staff person, but the senator or congressman might be able to pop in and say hello, shake your hand, have a minute or a few minutes to be introduced to him or her. So even if you're told that the meeting will be with a staff person, don't be surprised if the member of Congress pops his head in to say hello. As I said, you might have a meeting in the hallway or a conference room. The Senate offices are much bigger because there's only 2 senators per state, and so those meetings often will take place in a conference room or a reception area. But please don't take it personally if a staffer says, hey, do you mind meeting in the hall, because you'll see other people meeting in the hall as well. During your conversation with a staff or member of Congress, obviously you're going to introduce yourself, you're going to talk about where you're from and what program or school you work in. You're going to talk about your membership in TESOL, what's going on with your students, what challenges you're seeing, what's really difficult now, but also what is working. What are some of your success stories? Members of Congress and staff are obviously used to hearing about problems and about issues, and that's why they want to help. That's why they're doing what they're doing. But it is really nice to also hear about successes that are happening in their district or in their state that they can be proud of. And even though there are always challenges, it's also good to hear about some of the wins. They also, in congressional meetings, are going to expect you to ask for something. And oftentimes, they might begin the meeting by saying, hi, so glad you're here. What can I do for you? And so when you get the talking points, which we will provide to you, you will be seeing in terms of the various issues what, quote, our asks are or what our legislative priorities are. Also, a fantastic way to end the meeting, which we really, really encourage all of you to do, is invite the staff and or member of Congress to visit you at your school, in your classroom, meet your students, see what your day-to-day is like. As you know, members of Congress come home a lot. Members of the House are home usually for district work periods, at least 2 weeks every month. The whole month of August, members are home, and so inviting them to come see you where you work is a really nice way for them to get out, to meet more constituents, and they often like to do that. And if they can't do it when they're home, they'll also often send their district staff. And then lastly, you will be leaving with them information and materials so they will remember the visit.
So just some practical information, and again, a lot of this we were going to cover in detail at the summit, but just to give you some awareness of some of the logistics for the Advocacy Day itself on that Tuesday. To help you get to your meetings, we are going to provide everyone with Metro cards for transportation to Capitol Hill. The hotel we are at in Arlington is virtually right on top of a metro station, and so it is an easy metro ride to Capitol Hill, and we will be giving you directions and maps on the best way to prepare for your day and when to leave and all of that. As I've mentioned several times about connecting multiple people from your state so you can coordinate your meetings. So hopefully if you're in that situation, you've already received some information from us. When you are planning for your visits that day, you do want to leave enough time to go through security. As Ellen mentioned, it's very much like going through airport security, and I would expect that there'll be a lot of people up on Capitol Hill the day we're there, so expect there to be a little bit of a line. So you want to plan not only enough time to go through security, but then in terms of what you're bringing with you, because you're going to have to put things through an x-ray machine and all of that. So we will talk about that in more detail at the summit itself. But one other thing we will walk through is some tips in terms of which entrances you may want to move towards, which usually won't have a less of a line than some of the main entrances and the Capitol Hill offices, and other insider tips like that. Another thing in terms of, and this is something more in advance as you're planning your meetings, the House and the Senate have their office buildings on either side of the Capitol, and it's probably a good 10 to 15-minute walk between the two, just outside, depending upon, of course, the weather that day. Today it is rather hot and humid in the D.C. area. It may cool down a little bit by then, so you want to take that into your planning in terms of how you're going to be visiting different offices that day. One tip that we often tell recommend to folks is that as you're planning your meetings, you want to try to cluster them geographically as best as you can. So if you're going to be meeting with 2 Senate offices, you may want to have them both, say, in the morning or in the afternoon, so that way you're really only crossing the Capitol complex once as opposed to going back and forth between the House and the Senate multiple times. Also, if you know that you'll be meeting with, say, 2 representatives, and they happen to both be in, say, the Rayburn office building, trying to maybe plan those meetings together so that way you can do all the meetings in one building at one period, then leave the building once and not have to go back and forth again. So there's different ways to sort of plan your day. And one of the things that we provide for you is a map of the Capitol Hill complex. You should be able to actually download that from the group in the TESOL library to give you a sense of the layout of Capitol Hill. And another tip that Ellen mentioned is, the meetings themselves they may happen in the hallway, they may happen in the office, but they're probably going to last about 15 or 20 minutes. The congressional schedules are jam-packed. There may be a lot of meetings happening that day. Some may be a little bit shorter, some may end up being longer, depending upon what is on the agenda for that day. But I think a rough estimate is 15 to 20 minutes. So as we prepare for that day, we will help you and give you time to practice making your meetings focused, making sure you cover all the main points you want to cover, making sure you have time to provide the ask of what it is you'd like to ask a member of Congress to do, and leaving your key information behind. So Ellen, do you want to cover this slide?
Sure. Here are some more practical hints for you. In terms of what you should wear, please wear business dress, but be comfortable. It's most likely going to be pretty hot while you're here, humid, and at the same time, so you'll be going in and out of like air conditioning. It's very humid outside air, so bring a sweater. Often in June and July we have sort of thunder showers at the end of the day, so I'd bring an umbrella if you can. And most importantly, wear comfortable shoes. I mean, the floors in all the congressional office buildings and in the Capitol, they really are marble, and that is really hard on your feet, so please wear comfortable shoes. We'd also like to ask you just to show some courtesy for your appointments, meaning if you're running late, that is not a problem, but please call the office to let them know that you're running late and you'll be there in 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 15 minutes. They will really appreciate that. The member of Congress is scheduled down to the minute. Staff are also highly scheduled, so it's just a polite thing to do to call if you are running late. We want you to stay on message. As John said, these meetings are only going to be about 20 minutes long, so if you sort of veer off sort of topic, the meeting can quickly be filled up with, talking about maybe, a common place that you both, the staff and back home, and then you will have lost the opportunity to talk about the legislative priorities. So be ready with anecdotes and stories. While members and staff obviously are really interested in evidence-based practice and excuse me, and data points, at the same time, they're people. They want to hear, and they can remember things oftentimes better through an anecdote or a particular story that happened in your classroom or while you were teaching other individuals to be ESL teachers. So it's really, conversation is a combination of anecdotes and also some hard facts about your successes and challenges. And don't forget your business cards so you can leave information behind with the staff.
And just to add to that quickly, in terms of the stories, as I mentioned before, doing homework, bringing numbers and statistics are really great. For example, you can say in my school district over the past 3 years, we've seen the number of students, English learner students in my school district increase from 50 to 250, and so we've seen a 400 or 500% increase just in 3 years. However, let me tell you a story of this one particular student, a success story, because we were able to provide the services that she needed. This is the story of that success. This is what effective teaching looks like in practice, and the good results that come from that. Therefore, one of the things I'm really here asking you for, role-playing, is we need to see an increase in funding for ESL for these particular programs, because as we see the increase in demand, we need to keep the supply up in terms of federal funding for ESL, for example. So you can kind of weave in the different points together. And then in terms of the business cards, if you don't already have business cards, you can simply make some up. Either just printing some out on some paper. There are some online sites that you can order business cards pretty quick and cheap. But it's an easy way to provide your contact information and leave that with the congressional staff for your meeting. And also be sure to collect their business cards too, because that way you'll have the direct contact information, their direct phone line, their direct email address that wouldn't otherwise be available on their website. Here we go. So, Ellen, do you want to do the do's and I'll do the don'ts?
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, so basically what are the do's? Say thank you at the end of the meeting for the member of Congress or their staff person's time. Even maybe if you didn't see eye to eye on every single issue, you do want to say, thank you for taking the time to meet with you. As John has said several times already, please do some homework. Know your legislator. I mean, we're talking like basic facts, like are they a Democrat? Are they a Republican? Have they been in office for a long time? What committees are they on? Be flexible. Be prepared. As I say, to respect their time, they might have to change your time in which you're scheduling a visit. So flexibility is also a good word of the day. Stay on your message. Try and really use this time to educate and advocate for what's happening with you at the local level. And the more effective meeting you have is to really have a clear ask at the end, whether it's literally, please co-sponsor, such and such a bill, or please work on increasing funding for Title III, English Language Acquisition, in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. That's going to be the most effective kind of ask. And I'm going to say it one more time. Remember, your goal really is to build a relationship with that staffer. You're going to leave information with them, but you want to become a resource. You want to become the go-to expert. You don't want this to be your first and last meeting. You want to be called on back at home when any issue arises affecting ESL, whether it's teaching adults or kids or international folks who are coming to learn English. You want to be a resource, and you want to be known as an objective person who's going to give accurate information that can help the legislator at the end of the day, and that once you meet, it's not a first, as I said, it's not a first time and a last time visit all in one, but this relationship can grow over email, and hopefully the staff or the elected official is going to be coming to visit you at your school, and it should be seen as the beginning rather than just a one-time deal. I know that one of the early stories from one of your colleagues who participated in an early policy meeting, one of the first ones TESOL did, it was actually when then President Obama with Senator Obama, and she went to visit the office, and it was the first time she met with the education staffer, and he did not know a lot about the issues in facing English language learners, but he was very interested. This individual was from Chicago and teaching in the Chicago public schools, and so they started a dialogue. The staffer did follow up a couple of times during the year with her to ask her questions, information, and then she did come back for a second year the following June, and she was so excited because it was a completely different meeting, because the staffer had, he was at a different place. He had gained a lot of knowledge. She had helped him gain that knowledge, and they had a more sophisticated type of conversation, and it was because she really took it to heart that she built that ongoing relationship, and she was very helpful to the staffer, and she herself then that second year had a much more beneficial visit with him.
That's a great story. I'm glad you remembered Maya's experience. Yeah, that was one of several good experiences we can, memorable moments where someone was able to come back and we saw the demonstrable relationship built.
Yeah.
Okay, so now do some of, here we go. Some of the don'ts, some which we've covered already. Don't be late. To really try to respect the office's time. If you find that you are running late, sometimes it's inevitable, you want to call ahead. One tip we've passed along and heard from other participants is that if you're in a meeting that actually is running late and going to another meeting with another member of Congress, sometimes the office you're in might be able to help reach out to the next office and let them know, so-and-so's on her way. She just was in our meeting. We just went very long because we were so caught up in conversation. So please try to think ahead to your next meeting and try to plan appropriately. And as Ellen said before, don't show disappointment if your meeting turns out to be with a staff member instead of with the member of Congress directly. It is a busy time, but members of Congress and more importantly their staffs, they kind of keep a mental record of who they're meeting with and how things go, and I don't think that will show well if you suddenly become very deflated because the member of Congress isn't there. Another key thing is don't assume staffers know anything about the kind of issues and challenges you're facing, or they might not know much about ESL. Sometimes it may be helpful to even start out your conversation asking, how much do you know about English language teaching in ESL? Depending upon the member of Congress, if they've been in Congress a long time, working a lot on education policy issues, the staffer might know some information about ESL or English language teaching. If they're a new member of Congress, and a lot of members in the House who serve on the education committees are pretty new, they really might not know much at all. So you may be having a different kind of conversation. So don't assume that they might know a lot of information. And one of I think sometimes the thing you want to be aware of is how much sort of jargon you're using. Certainly at the TESOL convention and at TESOL events, we can use all sorts of terminology that we know pretty well in terms of the TESOL field, but the member of Congress might not even know what TESOL means. So be aware of the kind of language you're using and how that dialogue is going to play out. Please try to stay on message. Don't get off message. It's really key. Your time is very limited. Another key thing is don't make up answers. Sometimes when you're meeting with a member and their staff, they may come up with a question you just don't know the answer to. And so don't make up something or try to punt because you don't want to be conveying any incorrect information. The better response is, I'm not really sure about that, but let me look up that information and follow up with you. For one, that'll help, convey, what information you know, but also kind of sets the ground for building that relationship, and that you can be that reliable resource to provide accurate information. Don't forget to leave leave behind information, as we mentioned, and don't forget to follow up and write a thank you letter or email. Just a simple note acknowledging them for their time, especially if you said you were going to follow up with information. That's a good opportunity to do that. And that, with about 5 minutes to spare, brings us to the end of our slides and what we've presented what we put together in terms of the orientation for the summit. We do have some time for questions. If you have any questions about anything we've covered, anything we haven't covered, we have a few moments if you want to ask, either over the line or just post it in the chat box. We can take a few moments now.
And I just want to reiterate that we are going to be going over all these tips and talking points again, obviously, when we all meet on Sunday the 20th and on the Sunday the 22nd.
22nd and the 23rd.
22nd and 23rd. But we just thought having this preview gets you in the right mindset, and you can do a little homework and sort of get excited about coming to D.C.
So does anybody have any questions? As I mentioned, you can either say it over the air or post it in the chat box if you'd like. Well, while we wait another minute for questions, I'll just repeat for the sake of the recording that we will send out again copies of the direction and information sheets. They are available online in the library, and one of the pieces of information that we include in those information sheets is a meeting schedule. So they help you plan your day as you contact members of Congress in our offices. An actual schedule you can fill out, because we would like you to submit that the day or two before the summit so we know which offices you'll be meeting with. And I see we have 2 questions have popped up in the chat box. The first question, Latisha's asked, you mentioned in email that affiliate reps could possibly be attending an additional meeting. Could you expand on that? Of course. Since several of you will be coming representing your affiliates, your state organizations, what we're in the process of doing right now is identifying the key members of Congress on the education committees. And so we might follow up with you by Monday. We will follow up with you by Monday if there's an additional meeting we want to make sure you have. That if, for example, your individual representative may not serve on, say, the House Education and Workforce Committee, but there's another representative from your state that does. And since you're representing your state organization, we would encourage you to try to set up a meeting with that person. So so by Monday we will send you that information, who that person might be, if that applies to you, and we'll give you some additional directions to how you might go about setting that up as a representative of your state organization. And then Latricia also asked, are there other means of contacting attendees from my state, a phone number by chance? Yes, I think we just sent out information to give email addresses, but what we can do is put together some contact information for phone. We can send that out individually. One of the other things you should be able to do is, if you're able to log into this group in the TESOL community, that's our community platform, there's a group specifically for this event, and you can find a list of everyone who is attending, and usually their profile information. But we can also follow up and provide some additional information to help you connect with one another other than by email. Terry posted a question about she's new to the summit and she's not familiar with the access to the information online and the group in the TESOL community. What we'll do is we'll send out a set of directions again. It's rather than me going over detailing over the phone here or over the computer line how to do it. It's basically a website. It's community.tesol.org. And you'll have login information, and you'll get sort of there's an online group there where there's a library where these documents are posted and other information. So we will resend that information. Okay, so it's a couple of the questions I've seen posted. We have time for 1 or 2 more if anybody wants to post a question in the chat box or over the phone. And if you think of any questions after the fact, please don't hesitate to contact myself. You have my email address. Sydney Black and Valerie Borschel are also on staff and are helping out with the event, so they can answer any questions you may have as well. So I'm sure you may think of something right after right after the orientation ends or next day or so. So please don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us if you have any questions.
And I just want to thank you for kind of organizing this opportunity. My interest is in advocacy and policy, and this is the first time that I've really heard about this, although I've been a TESOL member for a very long time. So just thank you for the organization and putting that information out there.
Great. Well, you're very welcome. We're thrilled to have you come for this your first time, and we're glad you're interested in these issues. And one of the things we've been trying to do each year with the summit is, as I've mentioned, it's been slowly expanding. And at the end of the summit, we will be giving everyone asking you to complete an evaluation form. And each year we're trying new things and adding new things. And we really want to hear from you about how, what has worked for you, what could be improved. As we look to grow this program, we want to hear from those of you who come and participate about what new features you might like to see. So, it's actually through your feedback that this has really grown. So we're really thrilled to have you come and participate this year. And one more question has popped up. Latricia has asked, when contacting our members of Congress, what specifically should we mention when trying to set up an appointment? Most sites ask for a topic. I've mentioned immigration, yet feel that it should be also include education. Is there something that would be more focused to open the door? That's a good question. We do provide, and we will send it out again, sort of a sample letter you can use. I'm not sure, Ellen, and I defer to you if there's sort of any sort of particular topic that really sort of that will be key to mention to say, oh, this will be sure to get a meeting. What we've been recommending is to say we want to, you're coming as part of the TESOL Advocacy and Policy Summit or TESOL Advocacy Day. We want to talk about ESL and English language teaching because that's generally the focus.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I don't know. You should mention that you're coming to town, as John just said, for this meeting, and that you are X. I don't know. A teacher. You teach X kind of students, and you would like to talk about, whether it's, I don't know if it's adult education students policy or English language learners in the K through 12 sphere. I mean, I would be very specific about what you do, who do you teach or work with, and related to the education issues. In terms of immigration, I mean, I don't know, is that real? If you want a meeting on immigration, because it's going to be a different staffer than anyone handling education issues, you need to explain why you think you're an expert in this area. If you want to talk about the challenges facing, immigrants in the adult education space or immigrant children, I still would, if that's more what you want to talk about, then I really would focus it on the education policy or area.
That's a good point, Ellen. Is that the TESOL profession sort of rather unique in that you kind of almost bridges education and immigration, or certainly anything that happens relating to immigration or immigration reform has an impact on the TESOL field. However, in terms of Congress, typically immigration issues are handled by a different committee than those in education, and frequently by a different staffer. So to Ellen's point, if your request talks about immigration issues, will go in a different direction versus education issues. And certainly I think the bulk of what we'll be focusing on the summit is more in the education space or education policy space than it would be in sort of the immigration reform space. So to sort of close the loop on your question, I think I would definitely focus more on in terms of education, and to specifically say English language teaching or ESL. Great. So we are a few minutes past. I want to respect everybody's time, but if anybody has a last-minute question, we can take it now. Otherwise, you can certainly follow up on email with me or with any of other members of staff. Well, I think that's it. I think we're about 5 minutes past 4, so we're pretty much exactly at an hour. So I think with that, we will go ahead and thank you everyone for your time, and we will close the orientation. You're welcome, Natalie. And as I've mentioned, we will be just redistributing some of the information in terms of the directions on how to contact members of Congress. I'll also redistribute the information in terms of how you might log into the TESOL community and the group in the TESOL community if you're not already familiar with that. And we will be posting a copy of this recording online as well as with a copy of the slides as well. And if you have any questions over the next couple of days leading up to the summit on the 22nd, please feel free to contact myself or anybody else here on staff. And we will look forward to seeing you soon in Washington, D.C. So thank you everyone for your time, and take care and have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.